The reputation of an entire city was once held together by a 5-ton noose. We're looking at a truly grim mechanical spectacle forged from iron and steam, one that anchored a dark shadow over the history of the American South. Picture the autumn of 1916. A crowd of 3,000 people just descended upon a small Tennessee boomtown. They gathered to witness an event that honestly defies modern comprehension. It's this chilling collision of commerce and cruelty. The setting? A muddy rail yard, cold and totally unforgiving. This was the stage for the public execution of Mary the Elephant. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just some random act of savagery. It was a calculated sacrifice designed to preserve the moral standing of a community. It's a stark reminder of what happens when a town's financial lifeblood suddenly outweighs life itself. At the center of it all was Sparks' world-famous shows, a highly successful 15-car circus traveling the Clinch River Valley. The owner, Charlie Sparks, held an absolute fortune in a single asset. Mary was valued at $20,000 in 1916 currency. To put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of a multi-million-dollar corporate asset today. So this was an immense financial investment he was desperate to protect. And you can definitely see why. She was the undisputed crown jewel of the circus. A 30-year-old Asian elephant, formerly billed as the largest living land animal on Earth. She stood 3 inches taller than Barnum's legendary Jumbo. Her intelligence was just a marvel. She could play 25 tunes on musical horns, and get this, she could even pitch a baseball with a .400 batting average. But the architecture of this tragedy really began in St. Paul, Virginia, with one fatal error. The circus hired a drifter named Walter Red Eldridge to serve as an underkeeper. The catch? He was a hotel janitor. The man possessed absolute zero experience handling pachyderms. From there, the timeline of chaos accelerated rapidly. On September 12th in Kingsport, Tennessee, Eldridge was tasked with riding Mary to a watering ditch between performances. The path to the water should have been totally routine, but the lack of an experienced hand proved fatal. Mary paused on the way, reaching her trunk toward a discarded watermelon rind sitting on the ground. Eldridge, completely violating the golden rule of his very brief training, struck. He dug a bull hook deep behind her ear and violently jerked her flesh. Her reaction was instantaneous and devastating. Mary wrapped her massive trunk around Eldridge's waist, hoisted him 10 feet into the air, and slammed his body against a nearby drink stand. Then, with deliberate force, she stepped on his head. It squashed like a ripe melon right before a horrified crowd of onlookers and children. Absolute chaos erupted instantly. A local blacksmith named Hench Cox actually drew his .32-20 pistol and emptied the weapon into Mary's hide, but the bullets merely flattened against her thick skin, entirely useless. Outraged and terrified, the crowd unified into this rhythmic demand, chanting, "Kill the elephant! Let's kill it!" Overnight, Charlie Sparks found himself trapped in an impossible vice. Neighboring towns like Rogersville and Johnson City immediately banned the circus from their limits, if Mary remained alive. Simultaneously, a wildfire of mob vigilantism swept the valley, carrying terrifying rumors of a local faction moving in with a relic Civil War cannon to execute the animal themselves. Staring down total financial ruin, Sparks turned to his publicist, John Herron. Herron operated under a ruthless model known as press agency. This is a philosophy rooted in the belief that any publicity is good as long as it is loud. It's essentially the dark ancestor of today's outrage marketing. And the execution? Well, it required a spectacle to appease those neighboring cities. Herron surveyed the grim reality of the situation and offered a piece of chilling, highly calculated advice. He told Sparks, word for word, "If we have to kill her, let's do it with style." But how exactly do you destroy a creature of that magnitude? The logistics pointed straight to the neighboring town of Irwin, Tennessee, a primary railroad hub for the Clinchfield line. They possessed the only piece of industrial equipment in the region capable of lifting coal, timber, and a 5-ton animal, a 100-ton railroad derrick car. So, on a drizzly, foggy September 13th, the atmosphere in Irwin turned surreal and incredibly bleak. Schools were actually let out specifically for the event. 500 children and thousands of adults packed tightly into the rail yard. To prevent panic, the other circus elephants were led to the tracks, marching trunk to tail, just to keep Mary calm. The mechanics of the execution were intensely methodical. Men chained her legs securely to the iron rail. They struggled for agonizing minutes to fasten a 7/8-inch chain around her massive neck. Once she was secured, the operator engaged the groaning winch of the derrick. As the immense mechanical arm began to pull upward, a catastrophic failure occurred. Someone had completely forgotten to release the heavy chain securing her leg to the iron rail. The silent crowd heard the sickening sound of ligaments cracking in Mary's foot as she was literally stretched by the crane. The tremendous tension was just too much. The 7/8-inch chain snaps. 5 tons of muscle and bone crashed directly onto the unyielding iron rails below, shattering her hip. Panic rippled through the spectators, but Mary somehow remained upright and motionless, locked in a cage of incomprehensible agony. This macabre scene required a quick resolution. A roustabout had to physically climb up her back, ascending her like a hill, just to attach a much heavier chain. The winch engaged again, and this time it held. She was left hanging in the damp air for 30 agonizing minutes before a steam shovel deposited her remains into a massive, hand-dug grave. For 80 years, that single day cast a long, impenetrable shadow. The community became known globally as the town that hung the elephant. It's a stark example of how a single day of collective madness can permanently brand a society's identity. The atmosphere became so guarded that local history museum workers would literally walk away if visitors ever asked about Mary. Yet, the earth was holding on to a devastating delayed revelation. An autopsy performed deep in that secret grave finally uncovered the real truth behind her sudden rage. Right in the exact spot where Red Eldridge had struck her with his hook, Mary harbored a massive, severely infected tooth. The entire narrative of a murderous rogue elephant was entirely false. She was not a killer by nature. She was a patient, existing in extreme, hidden pain. When Eldridge drove iron into her infected wound, she instinctively lashed out, a suffering creature reacting to profound physical trauma. Today, modern Irwin has begun the long, heavy process of moving from atonement to action. The town has initiated a revival by partnering with the Elephant Sanctuary in Hohenwald, Tennessee. They now auction art statues, channeling funds directly into the care of retired circus elephants, desperately attempting to heal a century-old wound. But the physical reality of 1916 still remains beneath the soil. Mary's bones rest somewhere near the backtrack of the old powerhouse. They are unmarked. They are silent. They exist as a 5-ton reminder of the consequences when a society chooses the spectacle of justice over the mercy of understanding. The shadow of iron and steam still lingers over the Clinch River Valley, challenging how we weigh the actions of the past against the intent of the present. So, we have to ask, do you believe a city should be held responsible for a century-old crime? Or is it finally time for the stigma of Irwin to fade?